design movement's more than a Bible study. We want to be an organization that empowers the current generation of South Asian American students. So, with that in mind, we wanted to put together a panel consisting of three people who are currently serving missionally in the area God is leading them to. So, without further ado, let me go ahead and just introduce our panelists and thank them for being here. First up, I have the pleasure to introduce Pastor Jeremiah George. He started his career pursuing a master's in business administration and a master's in healthcare administration. However, God changed his path. Currently, he is serving at Ozark Christian Tabernacle as the associate pastor and music director. On Thursday nights, he hosts an Instagram live Bible study with his brother Joshua called But at Midnight, and has occasional guests and audience members join them on their live stream. In addition, Pastor Jeremiah has a clothing brand, Yirmiyahu Apparel, which means Jeremiah in Hebrew, which I just learned, that promotes sharing testimonies and deep truths about the Word of God. His prayer is for people, young and old, to be inspired to live authentic Christian lives that are led by the Spirit and truly set apart from the world. So without further ado, Jeremiah, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
Next up, I have the pleasure of introducing Christina Thomas. She is currently on staff with Cru in Boston, specifically serving MIT and Harvard students. Before that, she was an intern with Cru for 2 years at Cornell, where she studied civil engineering to the absolute joy of her family members. I'm hoping you're going to expand on that. Christina loves campus ministry and can't see herself doing anything else. But in her free time, you can find her playing guitar, having a deep, meaningful conversation with a friend, or working on her soon-to-be released podcast, Beans and Bros. Christina, if you want to expand on any of that, I saw Beans and Bros, I saw Joy of Family Members, and DMC. I like the acronym for Deep, Meaningful Conversations, but thanks so much for being here.
So excited to be here.
Awesome. And finally, last but not least, I have Arpit Vedanayagam. He is pursuing his PhD at Wayne State University in computer engineering and is an affiliate staff with Design Movement. He is engaged to Michelle Abraham, whom many of you know. Arpit likes sharing the gospel, drumming, videography, photography, woodworking, and Lord of the Rings. I actually share many of those same interests as well. His favorite verse is John 15:13. So Arpit, if you could, recite John 15:13 to us, and then we can go ahead and welcome you to our panel as well.
Sure, for sure. John 15:13 says, "Greater love has no man than this, that he laid down his life for a friend."
Awesome. See, that's always a true test, right? If you're gonna if you're gonna say it's your favorite verse, hopefully you got it memorized. So it's a lesson to all our audience members. Do the same. But without further ado, thanks so much, guys, for being here. And I'm just really encouraged to see three different people in just three different stages of life joining this diverse panel. So just to kick it off, and this is a question for anyone, maybe Arpit, we could start with you and work our way backwards. What motivated you to step up as a leader in your church, your ministry, or your workplace?
All right. I'm gonna tackle this in two ways. I'm gonna give a churchy spiritual answer, but then I'm gonna break it down into hey, what does that actually mean?
Sure.
So the churchy spiritual answer is, someone told me that the desire to step up in ministry or in leadership when it comes to anything God related is a God-given desire. And so for me, the original desire, I would say, was God-given. And so what does that even mean, right? It wasn't boom, I was born, I was let's step up into leadership. No. The way God worked in my life was through my dad. He's in full-time ministry in India. And so he, growing up, he would always encourage me to step up into leadership. And I'm talking right now, I used to be this super timid, shy guy. I'm I won't talk to anyone. I'll just be murmuring to myself. But my dad would always be hey, he would always throw me under the bus. Hey, Arpit, why don't you share your testimony here? Hey, Arpit, why don't you share what you learned in your quiet time today? And he essentially created all these opportunities for me. And then when there were other opportunities in my church which were open, he would encourage me. And then if I failed, and if I come back, Dad, I tried this and it didn't work, and I embarrassed myself, and I get a lot super emotional. So I'd be crying, and my dad would be it's okay, you can try again. So yeah, it was a God-given desire in the sense, but it was also my dad just encouraging me so much. that yeah, when I like moved to the US, I was like sure I wanted to like step up into leadership in whatever spectrum. So a couple of opportunities opened up in my church. Like there were no opportunities per se in that sense. I would just be like wherever I would find a need, I'd be proactive. I'd be like, hey, have you guys like tried this? Hey, what about this? So I think like leaders in design kind of saw that, leaders in my church saw that, and they like encouraged me to step up into leadership in that sense.
Awesome. No, that's such a great story. I'm just so encouraged by just seeing even how, our parents play such an integral role in our development in this process, and I'm sure some people can relate to that as well, while others may not. So I'm just glad to hear, both sides of that. Christina, let me turn it over to you and just ask you that same question. What really motivated that desire for ministry?
Yeah, so I got involved with Cru like right at the beginning of my freshman year, mainly because of two super persistent girls who kept inviting me to their Bible study. And I decided to go mainly to just like meet people and not so much because of like my own spiritual growth. But yeah, my first semester was wild to say the least. I think God crushed a whole lot of idols. We don't really have time for all of the details right now, but to summarize, he helped me realize that worldly success and seeking recognition from like my peers and like my family members was not the way to live in this world. And yeah, I was studying civil engineering, and Jeshwin mentioned that brought so much joy to my family members. And yeah, that was true. I'm like the oldest girl in the family, and to be a female engineer is like super empowering and like really cool, I guess. But yeah, I was like mainly in the engineering field to like, get the approval of my parents and my family. But yeah, like I said, God crushed a lot of idols, and in my brokenness, he drove me to him. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And I think like a big part of my spiritual growth was just my Cru community in general. God calls us to live in community, like God like eternally exists in community as the three in one. And I think because we are called to emulate him, like we should also have that desire for community. So yeah, I had people who like constantly pointed me back to Christ and like constantly shared the gospel with me. And I think that was just like so crucial for my spiritual growth. And yeah, the fact that there were people who poured into me, that kind of inspired me a lot. And I was like, yo, I kind of want to do this for the rest of my life. Like I want to pour into college students, like help them see that like, yeah, like Jesus is like the only one who can like truly satisfy all of their deep longings. So yeah, I can like see a little bit of myself like pre-Christ and like all of the college students that I encounter. And I think that motivates me to just like share the gospel with them and really love them. So
no, that's awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say I totally resonate with that. I feel like I share a similar story, and just seeing how God could do a total 180 with someone's life from where they were at the beginning of college to after. So just thank you so much for sharing that. And finally, Pastor Jeremiah, same question to you, that motivation, where is it coming from?
Yeah, I think it's really awesome just to hear how diverse of just a background each one stories is so unique. And I think the big thing for me, without getting too much into my story, is that God placed a desire based off of a need. I never thought I was going to go into ministry. I never thought that was something I ever wanted to do. I mean, I've always been serving in some capacity. I feel like, especially if you're a South Asian American that's has like Christian upbringing, you tend to get like slightly nudged into ministry one way or another. And I've always just thought like, okay, just passively. But I saw that, especially because pastors and I never saw a pastor really invest in my life. Never saw that them really trying to help mentor me growing things. And these are the things I saw that my community back at home was struggling with. And I saw that there was a need. And one thing that I strongly believe is that when you can recognize a need, there's a reason, there's a purpose for that. God wants to give you that eyesight to help fix the problem, maybe directly or indirectly, but you are given that specific vision to help create change for it. So God showed that to me and revealed that to me. And because of that, I was able to step up into the role now I'm in.
That's awesome to hear, and just hearing from each of you, that diversity between having experiences with family like Arpit, friends like Christina, and then even just not having experience like Pastor Jeremiah here, really being motivation, just shows the diversity of how God can really work to show us, where our callings lie. But just like with the stories of what motivates each of you, I know each of you are in a different season, a different stage, and a different path, if you will. So first, let me actually go back to Arpit for this question. Being employed and working, I think, is one of the things that people like myself need to hear about more as well. But how do you feel like you've balanced being a witness to your colleagues while you also feel the need to honor your employer at the same time? What does that balance look like in your life?
Yeah, I love this question. Just a heads up, and I'm gonna again drop the churchy answer, and then I'm gonna break it down. There's gonna be a pattern, guys. Churchy answer and breaking it down. So bear with me. So one of the verses that really challenged me is Colossians 3:23, and I'm gonna read it from the NIV. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. So for me, the way that translates is time management. And it's not a term that I'm comfortable with always. Oh man, if I have to manage my time, it probably means I have to wake up early. Man, if I want to get this other thing done, it means probably saying no to something else. Uh, it's it's not fun, but the thing is, it beautifully translates into the workplace, in the sense, when my employer is employing me, I'm working. I'm not looking at Facebook, I'm not watching YouTube videos, I'm not scrolling through Instagram. I'm just working. It helps me be productive, it helps me stick to my task. So now and my work is a little flexible, so I do research at the university, and they pay me for that. So as soon as I'm done with my weekly goals or my daily targets, I have the freedom to spend the rest of the time the way I want to. I can either work on what I want to do tomorrow with my research, or I can spend that time having conversations with people. Uh, so it gives me that kind of flexibility. So when I work diligently. I try my best, and a lot of it is just a spirit empowered focus. Left to myself, I'm Instagram. 2 seconds later, Instagram. That's me. But if I'm focused, it's a God thing. And the way that translates is, if people are hey, Arpit, you very focused. What's up with that? I'm not gonna be yeah, that's how I'm wired. Yeah, you could say that, but I try to say hey, this is what Jesus tells me in the Bible. Boom, opportunity for spiritual concept. Then they're what do you mean? You can either and when conversation moves towards a spiritual conversation, I just wait on God's leading. And what's God's leading, Arpit? What is this mystical term? Honestly, it's just feel it out. I know it sounds all Arpit, give me specifics. I'm sorry, guys. Just feel it out for now. Yeah, just feel it out. Sometimes I'm hey, why don't we continue with this conversation? Dig deeper, get into the conversation. If it leads to sharing the gospel, share the gospel. And then because my work has flexibility, I spend some extra hours after and finish my daily target. If I perceive this as oh, this is a deep conversation, someone's starting a conversation with me, I'm perceiving this to be a long conversation. I would ask the person hey, would it be okay if we talked about this after set a specific time, after work or over the weekend, and then go target that question. It was also challenging, especially last semester. I was working as a TA, and so one of the things that they told us hey, as a TA, you have authority. So if you're gonna share your opinion to people, that's a risky place. So I was what do? I want to share the gospel, sure, but I don't want to share this as my opinion and push it down people's throat. So I would during my TA hours, I teach. Not when it's not my TA hours, I would go to the student center, and the same students, I'd walk up to them hey, remember me? I'm your TA. You want to have this conversation? Engage with them with the gospel. So essentially managing time like that.
No, it's a great way to put it as well. Just like you said, right? When we're working for the Lord. And I like that concept because sometimes, me being a working person as well, sometimes I'd wake up in the morning, and because I work with finances, I'm often on spreadsheets, and I'm there's nothing sacred about, cell B2 right now. But that being said, I really resonate with that. and just understanding that we're bringing an aspect of God in our character in terms of how we work. So that's just great to hear. Christina and Pastor Jeremiah, I know each of you are pursuing ministry more vocationally, and I think that's something that all of us ought to hear as well. So maybe I'll start off with Pastor Jeremiah, and then we'll swing it to Christina. But how did the process of your growing desire to do ministry vocationally, how did that look like in terms of processing that with your parents? And I'm sure that's something a lot of our students are very curious about and might have that growing desire, but it's South Asian American parents. How do you kind of reconcile that?
Oh yeah, that's their first goal, is that every South Asian American is just like, let's go get into ministry, not to be an engineer, not to be a doctor, none of those things, obviously. No, actually, to be honest, my older brother, my younger brother are currently, my older brother is a resident and a pediatrician, and my younger brother's right now in medical school. I'm the only one not pursuing medicine, so that even brings even a greater love right there. My college days, I had a major in chemistry, a major in biology, a minor in entrepreneurship, and a minor in graphic design. I thought ministry, like I said, nothing of it. I never even like last resort type thing. But when God starts speaking to you and your relationship with God is a place that, like Arpit said, like, let your light so shine before all men that they may see your good deeds. It's not just the world. I think a lot of times we're so focused on letting our light shine before the world. Why not to our parents? I think when your parents see that you love Jesus and that love for Jesus is strong, and whenever you feel convicted to move in a place, then they can come and agree with it. A lot of times our relationship isn't known by our parents. We are known by our leadership staff, we're known by our platform, but our parents don't see Jesus in us. And that's where we suffer, because we are not an example of Christ in our own families. So because God worked in my life and it was something clear and evident to my parents, that transition was smooth by God's grace, because they were able to see this was a work of God, not a work of Jeremiah George. And that's the key, is like, when God is on full display, he makes all things work together. But whenever it's my will, my desire, you're going to have chaos. And I really pray that every person is pursuing God's will for their life, because not everyone's meant to be a pastor. Not everyone's meant to, be a musician, but everyone's called to do something for the Lord. And you should figure out what that is for your life.
No, that's I actually just feel convicted by that, being a light to your own family. It's like, oh, got pierced by that. That's beautiful. Christina, just same question to you as well. Do you resonate with what Pastor Jeremiah said? Do you feel like you have a different path in how that all kind of played out with your parents?
Yeah, I resonated with some parts of what Pastor Jeremiah said. Also felt very convicted. But yeah, man, I feel like I've been working on my relationship with my parents for like the past few years, like ever since I made the decision to pursue like full-time ministry. Yeah, when I first told them that I wanted to intern with Cru, they were just like, that makes no sense. Like, why would you do that? Like, why would you waste even like a year of your life like doing this? And they were especially concerned about the support raising aspect. They were like, you literally could make so much money as an engineer, and here you are like asking other people for money. And yeah, that they were just like, that would bring like so much shame to us. Like, why would you do that? And that like hit hard. Like, shame is not a fun feeling at all. And I was like super nervous going into the support raising process too. But I also felt super duper convicted that God was like leading me in this direction. And I really wrestled with the question, what does it look like to honor your parents, but also honor God? And I think that's like always such a hard question to answer. And I feel like it's like a case by case basis in terms of what you do. Thankfully, and I think it's like basically like related to what Pastor Jeremiah said. Like, my parents saw how much joy doing campus ministry brought me, and they're like, we don't think you would experience that much joy as an engineer. I feel like God is like really leading you in that direction. And yeah, for my intern year, so I actually had a construction management job like set up for me like right after my intern year. So I told my parents that, and they were like, "Oh yeah, like this is just like a gap year before you like take your career seriously." And I was like, we'll see about that. But then after my first intern year, I was like, no, I think I'm in this for the long haul. And I told them that, and they flipped out to say the least. They're like, you spent 4 years working your butt off to get your civil engineering degree, and you're not even going to utilize it. And I mean, there was like some points that they were making that were like actually like really true. And I feel like as a South Asian American, like I will always like wrestle with things like this. Like, what am I doing? Like, am I actually like doing this to serve God, or am I actually doing this to like serve my family and like get approval from them? And I feel like I always ask myself that question. But yeah, basically I was very persistent, very patient, tried to have a humble heart. I think it's so easy to just be so prideful and like think that you're right and your parents are wrong, but that's like not the stature you should have. But yeah, thankfully my parents warmed up. And okay, also long story short, after a series of events involving a lost wallet that contained my passport in it, I ended up basically meeting a woman who ended up joining my ministry partner team, and she gave me $10,000. And I told my parents that, and they were dumbfounded. They were like, "What the heck? Like, this is literally like a God thing." And I was like, "Yeah, it is a God thing, because I feel like God is truly leading me in this direction, and He will provide the funds if He truly is leading me here." So, yeah, I told them that, and like they still don't like the support raising process, but I think like that whole situation was like super encouraging to them, and they're like, you know, even though we don't like love what you're doing, we can see that it brings you so much joy, and we want to see you happy, and also we've seen God do some really cool things. So
no, that's awesome. And wow, just thanks for just being so transparent and sharing all of that. I know, you know, sometimes when we wrestle between that tension between parents, but then also knowing that this is what God's calling me to do, that's not necessarily easy. And I just love both, you know, Pastor Jeremiah's perspective as well as your perspective on what that looked like for you, because I'm sure, you know, those that are watching right now might be in one of those two camps. But I'm sure that, you know, everyone that just heard that was just so blessed by it. So really appreciate that from each of you. I'm going to expand a little bit on a question that I have here, and I'm going to start with Arpit with this one again and kind of circle back. So Arpit, you know, you had touched on earlier, one of the ways that you try to witness Christ is just in your work ethic, and maybe potentially expand on conversations there. But do you feel like there's other ways in which you potentially might face a little bit of, I don't know if scrutiny is the right word, but maybe look down a little bit differently because of things you may not do in the workplace or not participate in, which kind of sets you apart? And, you know, how do you kind of pursue that despite the pressures of you trying to be separate, but also be a light at the same time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Jasmine. This like one situation like comes to my mind in my life. So before my engineering, I was pursuing a master's in photography. And so as part of the course, one of the professors gave us an assignment, and the assignment was to do like a nude shoot. And I was like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do this. And he was like, why? I was like, well, for faith-based reasons, I'm Christian, this is what I believe in. I don't like, it's not a good space for me to be. It's not a kind of photography I want to pursue. Like, it was a very hard, like awkward conversation for me. And this photographer professor's like, wait, why? Like, I thought you, and like, he's like egging me on to like, I thought you were this kind of guy. I thought you, and I'm like, oh man, like, I wish I was as cool as you, man. But like, I don't know, at this point, I'm not able to do that. And so like, it was a place where I had to like take a firm decision, like, hey, this is not in alignment with my conscience. Yeah. And I had to like I've heard like different like people mentor me through that. They're like, oh, you could have done it, blah blah blah, and like they've given me. Then other people like, oh, good thing you didn't do it, blah blah blah, whatever. I think for me, at the end of the day, it didn't sit right with my conscience.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to like say no. It was awkward. It was in a class in front of like 17, 18 people. This guy's like, I thought you were like this. I thought you were like that. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, please, can we stop? But yeah, I think there are times where you have to like, even with friends, sometimes like I've had people ask me like, yeah, but like you're saying that I'm like doing all these good things. I like uh, go help like homeless people. I go do this. I go do that. You're telling me that that's not going to get me to heaven. That God's not going to be happy with those things. And like there are times like that where I've been like, hey, I'm glad that you do these things. Like it's a crazy world out there, and I'm glad that you're like doing things to make a difference. But like in terms of like what I believe in the Bible and what Jesus says, the only way to get to heaven is Jesus. So there are times you have to like lay down that hammer, so to say, in a
Sure.
very gentle way, in a very
Yeah.
gentle.
No, I definitely appreciate that, and that's one of the things that a lot of us that are vocational wrestle with, and what many of our students watching right now, will possibly wrestle with as well. Even for myself, right? How do you be convicted without compromise? I guess is how I put it. But I like that example, and just thank you so much for sharing that. And Christina and Jeremiah, I'm just going to ask a similar version of that question, if you will. I think Christina, for yourself, when you're ministering to students and really working in a student population, do you feel like there are things that you would advise them to potentially, once again, stay away from or be set apart in right now, so that it may not affect their witness or ministry in the future? Is that something that you can expand on?
Yeah, I think I'm going to focus mainly on things that students should pursue. I think one thing is for sure immerse yourself in a Christ-centered community. I think that's so important. Yeah, you need people who love the Lord and are encouraging you, but also speaking the truth and love to you when needed. Also find a mentor, like having someone to disciple you and like having that person that you can emulate as they emulate Christ is also super important. And that's been like super crucial for my spiritual growth and has helped me with my ministry. And yeah, if you need like help with that, feel free to message me or like one of the staff members. Yeah, and also grow in your spiritual disciplines. So this is not just like reading your Bible and praying. This could also be things like practicing silence and solitude and really being still and delighting in God's presence. I think, yeah, I only started working on my spiritual disciplines like this first couple of years in ministry, but they've been like so impactful to my relationship with the Lord. Like I just like love him so much more deeply because of these different practices. And I encourage you to check out the book, The Spiritual Disciplines Handbook. There are some practical steps in there and like, yeah, different practices that you can incorporate into your daily walk with the Lord. Also, make sure that God is truly at the center of your life. I feel like oftentimes we can feel pressure to just dive into ministry because it's like the right thing to do, or people like tell us that, yeah, we're just like so fit for the ministry life. But make sure that God is actually calling you in that direction and you're not doing this to put yourself on a pedestal. Because it's so easy to make ministry like not about God and all about you, even though ministry is about God. So yeah, I kind of like the analogy of think about if you're like entering into a relationship with someone. The single you will be the same person in the relationship. The person that you're in a relationship with will not change you, will not make you like holier or pure or whatever. And in the same way, like just because you are in ministry, that does not mean that you'll just like spontaneously exhibit like all of the fruits of the spirit. Like don't expect ministry to do what only Christ can. So make sure that your relationship with him is solid. But yeah, I think those are the little pieces of advice I would give students.
No, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing this. All very valuable advice. And once again, Pastor Jeremiah, I'm just going to turn it over to you as well. Same question, are there things, like Christina said, people should pursue, and would you want to expand on that? Or once again, two, do you feel like there's things that potentially you should stay away from so that it doesn't impact your spiritual life as much, kind of moving into the future?
Yeah, I think number one, I don't want to go too much into pursuit because Christina pretty much killed it. But one of the things I definitely want to emphasize is accountability. And this is something that I think most people don't really understand, because accountability tends to be whenever you're doing something wrong, whereas true accountability is just constantly talking about the highs and the lows. Because what happens is, if we make accountability, it seems like accountability has a negative connotation, as if you are struggling with something, therefore you need accountability. No, you need accountability because that's what the body of Christ is meant to do. Like, that's what community is all about, is holding each other accountable to things. But that also takes relationship. That also takes trust,
Mhm.
and things that we sometimes neglect because we only wait till problems arise to really pursue it. So really pursue godly accountability, share and be open, so that when you're struggling, as soon as it happens, you can attack it, and you can have people that really help encourage you and build you up in your faith. The thing about things to avoid, because this is a topic that I think a lot of people just don't want to avoid, in a sense. We really need to avoid ungodly relationships. And I say this
Mhm.
is like, when you are pursuing God, do not be with people that cause you to pursue them. And we live in a world that tells us that I have to pursue someone in order to get married. No, you don't. You do not have to pursue them. God brought Eve to Adam. What does that mean? It doesn't mean you don't make any effort, but God will give you the direction, the guidance. We don't trust God enough with relationships these
Mm.
days. We make it as if, no, I have to do so much work to prove my love. No, when it's something of God, He brings that person to you, and it's something that showcases His love poured out in individuals. But a lot of times we pursue the wrong relationships, and that causes us to deviate from our love for God. And that's something I just pray that, you know, one of the big things I don't think is talked enough is like, we get into relationships so early on because we're afraid of missing out on that perfect person. But God's
Mhm.
like, hey, I know who's perfect for you. Pursue me and everything. That's why it says in the word, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things, every little thing you need, God will provide for you.
Awesome. Yeah, just thank you so much for that. And I feel like each of you just brought some balance to that question and that perspective. Unfortunately, you know what? This has been such a great discussion, but we're just entering into that 30-minute mark, and so this is unfortunately and sadly the end of it. However, I'm sure that many students will definitely reach out, as you guys have all been so insightful. I was blessed by this. I just love talking with each of you. And I just wanted to really thank you, Arpit, Christina, and Pastor Jeremiah, for being here. And I really hope that we'll all continue to just pray for you and support you in any way that we can, just because you've just been such a blessing to me and all of us in general. So just thank you so much for doing this and being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Thank
opportunity.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being here and have a great one.